There is a very specific type of exhaustion that comes from fighting a war you didn't even know you signed up for. We see this pattern constantly, where someone enters a system, a workplace, a community, an industry, and they just act like themselves. They do the work, they speak honestly, they shine a little bit, and almost immediately they trigger this massive orchestrated immune response from the people around them. They get targeted.
They do, and the tragedy of it, or maybe the cruelty of it, is the confusion it causes. These individuals walk around with this immense unseen weight, constantly asking themselves, why is this happening? What did I do wrong? And the answer is usually nothing. Their fundamental mistake is not weakness, it is innocence. They operate under the assumption that everyone else is also just trying to do good work, or be honest, or live authentically. They fail to understand that their natural self is actually a profound threat to the environment they just walked into.
A threat because it exposes things.
Because it exposes everything. Think about how many systems, how many corporate hierarchies or social circles are entirely built on shared fictions. They survive on deception, on people agreeing to look the other way, on everyone playing a very specific, diminished role. Then someone walks in who just doesn't do that. They don't force it, they don't grandstand, they just have this unforced brilliance, this natural light. And without even trying, they illuminate all the dust in the room. They show the cracks in the foundation. The people who built their entire identities on those shared fictions feel that authenticity as a direct existential attack.
That innocence is dangerous, though. Walking into a room and assuming your competence or your truth will be welcomed is a quick way to get yourself dismantled.
It is, and the dismantling is incredibly systematic. The psychological term for this, which plays out heavily in organizational behavior, is tall poppy syndrome. It originated as an Australian cultural expression, but the research is deeply global now. A study published in Psychology Today actually looked at how this manifests, particularly among women in the workplace, and found that when someone is perceived as a tall poppy, meaning they stand out due to high ability or admirable qualities, their peers will actively use negative communication strategies to cut them down. We are talking about malicious gossip, withholding crucial information, deliberate social exclusion.
Wait, let's look at that. Is it actually about their light or their authenticity? Because sometimes people who think they are being authentic are just behaving with zero social calibration. They stomp all over established norms and then play the victim when the brook rejects them. I struggle to cleanly divide the world into innocent truth tellers and malicious schemers.
That is a fair distinction to draw, but the research specifically separates constructive friction from what they call malicious envy. When someone lacks social grace, the group usually corrects them openly. They get feedback. But malicious envy operates in the shadows. Research defining tall poppy syndrome notes that malicious envy is a destructive emotion, where instead of trying to improve themselves, which would be benign envy, the envious person actively desires to see the advantaged individual lose their status. They don't confront the person, they plot, they scheme, they wait for an opening to diminish the high performer because that person's success feels like an unbearable reminder of their own shortcomings.
So the plotting is a symptom of the system trying to regulate itself back to mediocrity.
Exactly. The system requires a certain level of dimness to function. When someone brings in a different energy, a higher frequency of authenticity, it destabilizes the control mechanisms. The people in power, or even just the peers who have settled into the comfort of the deception, suddenly feel off balance. They target the authentic person not because that person is weak, but because they are dangerously powerful just by existing in that space.
Let's apply this to whistleblowers. That seems like the ultimate manifestation of the natural self colliding with a corrupt system.
Whistleblowing is the perfect distillation of this dynamic. We tend to view whistleblowers after the fact as heroes, but in the moment they are almost universally treated as villains by their immediate communities, and it goes back to that innocence. Many whistleblowers do not start out wanting to burn the company down. They find a discrepancy, they take it to their boss, and they expect the boss to be glad they caught it. They assume the system wants to be healthy.
And the system usually ignores them. A study out of Harvard Business School looking at thousands of whistleblowers under the False Claims Act found that in almost 2/3 of cases, the company just ignored the initial internal complaint. The employee tries to do the right thing quietly, and they hit a wall of silence.
Which forces them to escalate, and that escalation triggers the psychological mechanism of betrayal. There is fascinating research from Boston College and Northwestern looking at the psychology of whistleblowing, framing it as a fundamental trade-off between two conflicting moral values, fairness and loyalty. The person blowing the whistle is driven by personal integrity. They value fairness and transparency. But the group they belong to values loyalty above all else. To the group, exposing the hidden truth is not a righteous act. It is a grave betrayal of the collective fiction.
The group demands complicity as the price of admission.
They do, and when you refuse to pay that price, when your authenticity refuses to bend to the deception, the retaliation is brutal. Studies show whistleblowers are subjected to intense retaliation, often ostracized and labeled as troublemakers. They experience profound isolation. The system attempts to crush them, to send a message to everyone else. Do not let your light shine. Do not expose the shadows, or this will happen to you.
I want to push back on the framing of the chosen or this idea of a frequency that destabilizes control. It borders on the mystical. If we are talking about organizational behavior, calling someone chosen feels like a coping mechanism for being socially isolated. Is it really a frequency, or is it just cognitive friction?
Actually, no. I think the word frequency works perfectly, even in a strictly psychological sense. Think about state authenticity versus trait authenticity. Researchers at the University of Southampton define state authenticity as the subjective perception that you are being your real self in a given moment, which creates cognitive fluency. When you are deeply aligned with your true self, your actions flow naturally. There is no friction in your own mind. You are metaphorically operating on a very clear, unencumbered frequency. Now contrast that with a workplace where everyone is heavily masking, engaging in surface acting, suppressing their true thoughts to survive.
The masking takes immense cognitive load.
Immense load. And then you walk in, operating fluidly without that load. Your very presence highlights the exhaustion of everyone else. Your unforced brilliance disturbs them, because they're working so hard just to maintain their falsehoods. They don't hate you because you are arrogant. They resent you because your ease exposes their effort. The frequency is just the resonance of an unfragmented psyche in a room full of fractured people.
That reframes the targeting completely. It's not a punishment for failure. It's a reaction to potency.
It is entirely a reaction to potency. And understanding this is how these individuals have to armor their minds. The constant questioning of why me destroys people. The realization that you are under attack because you are dangerously powerful, because your mere existence challenges the lies they built their lives on, that shifts everything. You stop trying to appease the adversaries who scheme in the shadows. You recognize that the friction is proof that your authenticity is working.
We leave it there, acknowledging that the weight you carry might just be the gravity of your own truth. We explored some deep organizational psychology today, pulling from tall poppy syndrome research and the ethical tightropes of whistleblowers. If this conversation helped you make sense of a room you recently walked into, send it to someone else who might be carrying that same unseen weight.